And then once you've got your Bible, you can open up to Deuteronomy 34. We are going to be finishing the book of Deuteronomy today. And so what that means for those of you that are not aware of this is kind of normal practice for us, and that is that next Sunday when we come in, we will not have a normal Bible study like we do. We will have a trivia challenge. What is that? Well, what I will do is I will have questions from every chapter in the book of Deuteronomy, all 34 chapters. And then I will ask those questions during class. Whoever answers the most questions correct gets a gift card from me. And we'll see how generous I'm feeling this week. Sometimes I'll give out 3 gift cards, top 3 people. But anyhow, you can win a gift card next Sunday. It's a fun way to end whatever book it is that we've been studying. And which reminds me also that we will be starting the next book, Joshua, probably about a month from now, maybe a little bit longer. We are going to we'll have our trivia challenge, and then we will have a 4-part series that I will teach before we get into the book of Deuteronomy. That also reminds me. This is keep this on the DL or the LD or whatever. But I will be teaching in the sanctuary on Mother's Day, okay, for Pastor John. So that means we will not have class in here. Sometimes we will just take everybody into the sanctuary and we'll have our own section. However, for that Mother's Day message, I'm going to encourage you. We will not have a section set up, but I will encourage you to sit with your parents, and obviously, if your mom comes to church, to sit with your mom that day because it's Mother's Day. But what we are doing in the meantime, between now and then, is we are going to be putting together a video. We're going to record you all, whoever wants to, telling us why you're thankful for your mom. Okay, and then what we will do is that will be cut up and obviously put together. But it will be a short video that will play that Mother's Day morning before my message, okay? So it's a really sweet way to make your mom feel special because she's going to be surprised. She's going to see your mug come up on the screen and be like, what is my son or my daughter doing on there? And then you're going to share, hey, Mom, thank you so much for, making me tacos or buying me some new huaraches or whatever. And then what it's also going to do, this is going to score you some major points with your mom, all right? So there might be a little bit of selfishness in there, but so we'll be doing that over the next few weeks, recording, and we will let you know when we're doing that. Encourage you to record a message for Mom, because we all know that you're broke and you can't buy her nothing. So Deuteronomy chapter 34, yes?
I have a question. So for the trivia, can we have a Bible split everything
Absolutely, okay. Yes, yep. During the trivia challenge, you will have your Bible open. And you may even want to have, if you take notes in here on Sunday morning, you may want to have those open too. Okay, it's an open book format. You guys are all familiar with that, open book test. So yeah, and you do not even have to participate. You can come and just hang out, look at the back of the heads of everybody that's participating. But it will be an opportunity for some of you to try to beat Joaquin, because normally Joaquin is you're usually up there, right? Like second place. You lost to Joab. Mr. Bible, right? But yeah, those guys are always, good, friendly, godly competition. So it's good stuff. But that'll be for next week, Deuteronomy chapter 34. Now, what we are looking at today is the end of Deuteronomy chapter 34. And let me share a few things before we get into this. How we finish things is more important than how we start those things. A good start can be extremely important. As I look around the room, obviously you all are young, beautiful people. Many of you have probably been raised in a Christian home for the most part, or at least you're here now and you're being raised in a Christian home. Your parents are doing their best to get you to church and pay for the crazy youth events that we do and camps and different things, because they want you to be involved. They want you to be here. They believe that it's valuable. They believe that there is some substance here for you. And so they're doing their best to raise you in the Lord. You've had probably a pretty good start. Being involved in youth ministry for a lot of years, I've seen a lot of beautiful students just like yourselves sitting in a classroom week after week, learning hearing the Bible studies, being at the events, the camps, the mission trips, the Nerf wars, all the different things. And I've seen many of those veer away from following the Lord and go off and disappear, really. Some of those return after a while. Some after a short time, some after a long time. And I've had the joy of seeing some of those return over the years. I've had the joy of seeing some students return and then get involved in ministry. But I've also endured the heartbreak of watching students veer away from the Lord, and they still have not returned many years later. And I still wait to hear about them and whatever happened to so-and-so, and what are they up to and what are they doing, and they disappear really from everybody's view. And that's a common occurrence. And in fact, this is not to be discouraging to you, but this is just fact. And the fact is that not everybody sitting here this morning is going to always follow the Lord for the rest of their lives. Some are going to veer off. Some of you are going to veer off. Some of you will return. Some of you will not. Some of you will leave high school, and we may never see you again. And you'll go off and you'll live your own life and do your own thing. What we're looking at here today is a man who started out pretty well. Had a good upbringing. Now, he was, when he was born, placed into a basket and put in a river, which doesn't sound like such a good beginning. But what that was a rescue mission. It was his mom trying to save the life of Moses by putting him in a basket, pushing him out into the river. And then what she did was she sent her daughter, the older sister of Moses, to follow the basket and see where it went. Well, as God would have it, the basket ended up in the presence of Pharaoh's daughter, because they were in Egypt at that time. And Pharaoh's daughter sent her servant. It's like, hey, what's that basket? Bring that basket over here. They brought the basket, opened it up, and there was this beautiful little baby in there. And she made that baby her own. Now, Moses was raised by his own mom, actually. If you go back and read the story, you find out that his sister came up and she goes, hey, Pharaoh's daughter, I see you've got a baby there. Would you like for me to find someone that can nurse your baby for you? Because, of course, this wasn't really Pharaoh's daughter's baby. And so she said, yes, absolutely. And so Moses' sister actually took Moses back to his own mom. So what happened was, as he's being raised, by his mom in those very early stages, and then later on with Pharaoh's daughter, he knew in his mind and in his heart that he was not an Egyptian. Although he was part of Pharaoh's family, he was not an Egyptian. And so he knew that. And so one day he was out walking, making his rounds, and the Israelites were slaves then, and he saw an Egyptian taskmaster beating an Israelite. And the Bible says that he looked this way and he looked that way, and he saw that nobody was there, so he jumped the guy, killed him, and buried him in the sand. And so Moses, we find out early on in his life, was a murderer. He actually murdered a man, took his life. Well, what he did at that point was he made his escape. He went on the run. And for the next 40 years, he ran away from Pharaoh and Pharaoh's daughter and the Egyptians. But he also was attempting to do his best to run away from God, until God appeared to him in the burning bush and called him back to Egypt. And many of us know the rest of the story. And so Moses had that, kind of rough start. Very early years were good, but when he got a little bit older, made a huge mistake. And it wouldn't be the last mistake that Moses would make. Moses would become God's leader to lead the people out of Egypt. And he would make mistakes along the way, because we all know no one is perfect. But still, he can be considered as one of the greatest leaders in the history of the world, really. Although he made mistakes, He finished well. And so that's what we're going to be looking at today. And at the end of our time today, we'll find out how it is that you and I can finish well. But you may be in the same boat. You may have started out well. You may be, you may have some Christian parents or a Christian parent. And yeah, maybe they've made their mistakes and they've done some things wrong, because all parents do. But maybe they're doing their best, and you recognize that, and you go, you know what, my parents are doing their best to raise me in the Lord, or at least to get me to church and teach me about the things of the Lord, but they certainly have made their mistakes. And maybe as you have done your best to follow the Lord, maybe you've made mistakes. Certainly you have. All of us have. And maybe you've made some mistakes, and what can oftentimes happen is the self-condemnation comes in, and certainly Satan gets in there and wants to kick you while you're down and tell you all about all the mistakes that you made. But as you and I look at the life of Moses, what will be brought out today in the chapter, at the end, this is the last day of his life on earth. As a human, I should say not as a human, but in a human body. We'll talk some more about that in just a moment, what I mean by that. But we will see a man who, by all means, was not perfect. Made some mistakes. But the tenor of his life, the bulk of his life was spent following the Lord. The bulk of his life was spent in obedience to the Lord. So that even though he made mistakes along the way, he is remembered for his faithfulness as he passes from this life to the next. And that's what we want. We're all going to make mistakes. You've made mistakes already. As you continue to follow the Lord, you'll make more mistakes. You'll sin. You'll struggle with obedience. And at times you'll be disobedient. But what we want to do is we want to always be recommitting ourselves to the Lord and saying, okay, Lord, I'm still yours. Like, help me to get up and let's go. Let's keep moving forward. And so that's what we're looking at today and remembering this man, Moses. Now, there are two main divisions, and I messed up my numbers there, so please forgive me. Those of you that take notes have probably figured it out by now. But verses 1 to 8, we are going to look at the exit of Moses. And then in verses 9 to 12, and that's all there is 12 verses, we are going to see the eulogy of Moses, and we'll talk about what a eulogy is in a little bit, although I think that probably all of you know what that means. But we start in the first section, which is his exit. Now, the reason I call it his exit, and make no mistakes, the Bible in just a few minutes as we continue reading will say that Moses died. It's plain that he died. What they mean by that is that his body died. His body expired. Moses didn't cease to exist. In fact, when you get into the New Testament, one of the times that Jesus goes up a mountain, he's always going up mountains, and he had just a couple of his disciples with him, he was transfigured on that mount, the Mount of Transfiguration it's called. And while he was up there transfigured, we're not sure exactly what all happened. It was something miraculous that happened that God performed. But while he was up there, Moses appeared with Jesus. So it becomes obvious to us that Moses didn't just die and then cease to exist. He's still alive, although not in bodily form. We'll find out what happened to his body here as we get a little bit further or into our sections here. But he makes his exit. He'll make an entrance again, like I said, later on in the New Testament. And then many good Bible teachers believe that in the book of Revelation, there are two witnesses that are mentioned, although we're not told their names, but many good Bible teachers believe that one of those will be Moses, that he'll make an appearance once again. We can't be sure about that because the Bible doesn't say, but this is his exit. Now let's find out what happens here. Verse 1, in this exit, the first thing that we see in verses 1 down to verse 4 is that he gets a private tour. A private tour. What a strange thing that as you're dying you would get a private tour, but there's a reason for it. Let's look at it. Verse 1, then Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is across from Jericho. Now these are mountain ranges in that area, okay? In the previous chapter, God had told Moses, you're going to die, go climb that mountain. And so he sends him up on this mountain, and here he goes up Mount Nebo, the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is across from Jericho. Now, you may know that the next leader is Joshua, and eventually we'll get into that book. But what we'll find is Jericho will be the first city that they attack in the promised land. So they'll go in, but they can see Jericho from where they're at, or at least Moses right now can see Jericho from where he's at. And it says that he was across from Jericho. And it says in verse 1, and the Lord showed him all the land of Gilead as far as Dan, all Naphtali, and the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah as far as the western sea, the south, the plain of the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees as far as Zoar. Now, all of these cities mean absolutely nothing to you and I, because we're not up at the top of Pisgah looking out and having somebody direct us toward all of these lands. So what does all of this mean for you and I? Well, what it means is that in this private tour, what God was showing Moses was, these are all different places in the promised land. Now, why would God, as Moses is about to die, why would he show him the promised land? Now, the one of the reasons, at least, I think there might be two, one of the reasons is revealed for us in verse 4. Look at verse 4. Then the Lord said to him, this is the land of which I swore to give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, this is what God said, I will give it to your descendants. I have caused you to see it with your eyes, but you shall not cross over there. I think it's funny at the end of verse 4 when God tells him, I'm showing it to you, but you're not going to cross over there and go see it. I only think it's funny because God's told him multiple times before, you're not going into the promised land. And he tells him here one more time, I know you're getting ready to die. Yeah, I feel sorry for you. There's the promised land, but you don't get to go in, so don't get all excited, buddy. I don't think he really said it that way. In my strange imagination, I imagine it that way, but I'm sure it wasn't that way at all. He's showing the promised land to Moses. Why would he show the promised land to Moses, but not, even though he will not be allowed to go in, even though he's going to die? Well, for one reason, we see that here in verse 4, it becomes obvious that what God is saying to Moses is that, look, here's the land that I promised to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, the guys that came before you, Moses. What God is revealing to Moses is, I'm keeping my promise. What I told those guys, what I told you, Moses, I'm keeping my promise. And the people are about to follow Joshua into the promised land, but God keeps his promise. It may seem like well, that's simple, that's easy, everybody knows that. But that's something that needs to be ingrained in your mind and in your heart. Why? Because there are going to come times in your life when you will question that. Hard times. When a parent comes home and says, listen, I've been diagnosed with cancer, or a friend says, listen, I just want to end my life, or you're going through some struggle, with a friend, or maybe later on with a spouse, or with, some relationship. And you'll feel like, what, I don't even know really if God is even around. It's important that you and I remember these lessons and we go, no, wait a minute, God keeps his promise. That he who began a good work will be faithful to complete it. All right, God. I don't feel you. I don't sense you. I'm not entirely sure if you're even here, but your word says that you are. And so I'm gonna hold to that, Lord. And those are at times you're going to be holding on by, this is the skin of your teeth, as we say. And you'll find yourself just gripping on to, the end of a rope. And you'll just feel like, man, I'm at the end of my rope. And you'll need to tie a knot in that rope and just hang on for dear life, it'll feel like. But God is faithful. And so one of the reasons that God is showing Moses this is so that Moses will understand that God is faithful. God is keeping his promise, which leads me to believe. Now, this is I'm making a distinction here. This is my opinion. And this opinion is based off of past experiences and even my own life. So this is not foolproof. I could be totally wrong on this, okay? But I'll share it with you anyways, and you can make your own decision about it. I think that also what God is doing with Moses is that he's comforting Moses. Moses knows that he's about to die, but he loves the people dearly, loves them dearly. And I think that Moses is concerned, and even very concerned, that they are going to get into the promised land. You see, 40 years before this, 40 years prior, Moses had led them to the promised land. And then there were 12 spies that went in, and the 12 spies came out and said, no way, we can't go in there. And so they scared everybody, and they didn't go into the promised land. And so Moses was that close. He was there. He was on the border. And he didn't get to go in to the promised land and experience the promised land. And so I think that what God is doing here also is that he's comforting Moses, saying, no, come up here. Let's pick a high point. Look out. See all the land out there? How beautiful it looks, how green it is. There's all the different areas, and different where the different tribes are going to go. Here it is. And I mean, it's even mentioning it there for us. The Lord showed him all the land of Gilead as far as Dan, but also Naphtali, and the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, and all the land of Judah as far as the western sea, the south, the plain of the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees. So he's showing him, look, here's all the different areas. Here's what's going to happen. Here's where all the people are going to be, and this is where I'm going to set your people up, Moses. Any good parent, any good leader would want the same. Any good leader or any good parent would want to leave something behind for their loved ones. If it's a parent, they want to leave something behind for you. Those are things that you think about. Now, I think about those things. As I look at my life now, I've got more years behind me than I have ahead of me. And I know that soon my life will come to an end. I know that it's not going to last forever, and it's going faster and faster every day. So I know that it's going to come to an end soon, sooner than I think, sooner than anyone thinks. And so I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about my family, and I'm thinking about my kids, and I'm thinking about what I'm leaving behind, and what am I leaving? What kind of a legacy am I leaving for them? Moses wanted to be sure that the work that he had imparted, that he had invested for these people, that there was something that they could take that and build upon it. And so God is graciously showing him, look, here's where you've led the people. Here's the land. And Joshua's going to take them in there. Don't worry. There it is. And God is making sure that, no, this is the land of Manasseh. This is Naphtali. And these are the lands. This is where Judah's going to be. And he's pointing it all out. And I mean, if God is telling you, no, this is where it's going to be, right here, then you can be sure. You can bank on it, right? You can bet on it. You say, no, that's what's going to happen. And so he's showing Moses graciously, mercifully, lovingly. He's showing Moses that, look, the people are going to be cared for. And in fact, in verse 4, he says, listen, I swore it to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob. I'm keeping my promise. I will give it to your descendants. It's theirs. I'm about to lead them in. I'm going to lead Joshua, and then Joshua's going to lead them, and we're going to get you into the promised land. Everybody wants to know that. Now, why would I be sharing that with a bunch of young people who seemingly are young and beautiful, and you feel invincible, and you feel like, well, you know what, I'm going to live 80, 90, 100, 120 years, Why would I be sharing that with you? Because life goes fast. And one of these days you're going to lay down to take a nap, and you're going to wake up, and you're going to be 47. You're going to be old. And your body's not going to look the same. And you're going to have kids. And you'll be driving a dirty minivan. And you're going to go, man, what happened? Life flies, man. It moves so fast. And so what you want to do is, you want to leave a legacy for people coming after you. But you go, hey, well, I don't even have any kids. What are you talking about? Leave a legacy? Yeah. But you got to understand that the decisions that you make right now are building that legacy. The decisions that you make right now at this point in your life are building habits, either good and godly habits or bad habits. And the habits that you are building right now are going to last you a lifetime. I'll give you an example. Some people make horrible mistakes, same age as you, and take someone else's life and spend the rest of their life in prison. You see what I'm saying? It's a drastic example, but it is an example. What kind of decisions are you making right now? And what are you building in your life that you can leave with someone else? You want to be thinking about that now. You don't want to wait till you're 50, 60, 70 years old to go, you know what? Maybe I should leave some things for somebody else. No. You want to be building that right now. You want to start building that right now. so that at the end of your life, whatever age that might be, you're leaving something behind. Moses was leaving a legacy behind. He had led the people. This was the second time that he had led the people to the promised land. He was not able to go into the promised land, but this is the second time. He's done his job, we'll find out. And he made some mistakes along the way, but he's done his job. And that will be said here plainly in just a moment. But you and I got to be thinking, this life doesn't last forever. It goes quick. I mean, you're 14, you're 15, you're 16, you're 17, 18 years old. Think about it. How fast has the time gone? Doesn't it just seem like yesterday I was 3 years old and playing with Legos? Like, what in the world happened? It goes quick. And the older you get, it will go quicker and quicker. And when you start getting bills, it goes even faster. You're like, wait a minute, didn't I just pay this last week? Pay it again. It goes faster. He gets this private tour of the promised land because God wants him to know, I'm keeping my promise. Here it is. Yes, you're leaving, but the people are cared for. And so he comforts Moses in that way. But here's what else he does in verses 5 through 8 of this exit. He gets a private funeral from God. Now this is a bit awkward because we all know what a funeral is like. For a loved one, you show up, all the family shows up, friends show up, co-workers show up. Everybody gets there, gets together. And so people go up and they talk about the dead loved one. And then everybody gets together after to go eat tacos or whatever to celebrate that person's life. Well, Moses gets a private funeral from God. Why does that happen? Well, it happens because they're good friends. And let's find out what happens. Verse 5. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there. There it is. He died. His body died. Died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord. That God had already told him, you're going to die. And so in verse 6, here it is. And he buried him in a valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor. But no one knows his grave to this day. No one knows where Moses was buried. What a strange thing. Now, it is a strange thing because we like to venerate people, especially special people, leaders. We want to know, so in some countries and some religions, leaders they lay in state, meaning they put them in like a glass case so that everybody can come and look at them. And they're somewhat mummified, but they're definitely not alive anymore. Sometimes it's just the bones of that person. And people can come, and what happens is they bring flowers, bring money, might bring candy, they might bring beads, they might bring prayer requests to that site. What happens is that oftentimes those leaders that are venerated, they become a place of worship. They become an object of worship. And so probably in trying to avoid that with Moses, I mean, think about it. If we knew where Moses was buried and we were going on a tour of, the Holy Land, we'd probably go, hey, can you take me to the grave site of Moses? I want to go, lay down some flowers, or, I want to go lay down this picture of my mom or whatever. You'd want to go to that spot and go see it. Now, in the book of Jude in the New Testament, we won't go there, but in the book of Jude, there's one little verse in there, and it's a strange verse, but it says that one of the angels of the Lord was fighting with Satan over the body of Moses. What? What's that all about? Because we're not told about that here. So it happened at some point during all of this, or maybe after at some point. What was going on? Well, we don't know. It doesn't tell us. My best guess is that Satan probably wanted the body of Moses, maybe to be able to reanimate the body of Moses, kind of bring him back to life, so to speak. And, that way people would see it. And probably what Satan wanted to do was probably have people worship Moses rather than God, because that's what Satan always wants. He wants people to not worship God and worship anything else. So why else would he want the body? But we're told here that nobody knows where the body's at, which is probably a good thing. And so he had this private burial. Now history, and there are a couple of historians, one of them being Josephus, and another one is, what's his name? Philo, I think. Or I may be completely wrong on that. they have a record of the death of Moses, and they said that Moses, as he walked away, he went up the mountain and the people stayed back because Moses had actually motioned for them, all the people to stay back, and that Moses went up on this mountain and that a cloud descended and then Moses was gone, which sounds accurate, when you're going to, a funeral that God is putting on. Here comes this cloud, and then all of a sudden you're just gone. It seems like something God would do. But God buried him out there, and it was a private funeral between the two of them. Imagine that. I mean, we like to have loved ones. We think about our funeral. We go, well, man, obviously I'd like to have all my family and my friends there, having a good time and remembering me fondly. But imagine if no one showed up. But imagine if no one showed up, but God was there. You'd probably be like, oh, that's fine. That's good. God came to my funeral. That's a pretty big deal, right? And so God shows up, or God takes his life, buries him in the valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor, but no one knows his grave to this day. And then he goes on to tell us this in verse 7, that Moses was 120 years old when he died. That's old. You thought that your grandma was old, or that your grandfather was old. Some of you might still have a great-grandparent, and you're just like, man, they are old. Don't get too close. Don't look at them because they might break. Moses is 120 years old. And look what it says about Moses. His eyes were not dim, nor his natural vigor diminished. That means that he was an old man but didn't need glasses like Pastor Chris does. And I can see you all fine because I can see distance. But I can't really see my iPad unless I get about right here. And that's what those are. Those are readers. And so I look and I go, oh, okay, yeah, now I can see my iPad up close. But he didn't need glasses. His eyes did not dim. And his natural vigor, we're told there in verse 7, had not diminished. Now, I do not think that means that, 120 years old, but he was still like a 20-year-old, and he can go out and run a marathon. I don't think that that's what it means. Maybe it does, but I don't think it does. I think what it means is that he just was naturally healthy. As he's 120 years old, he was still an old guy. Even he had said a chapter or two back, hey, I'm 120 years old today, and I can't go in and come out like I used to. So he knew that he was an old guy. But he wasn't in a wheelchair. They weren't having to pick him up and carry him. They didn't have to put him, build a special chair and, pick him up and hoist him and take him somewhere. He was able to walk up that mountain on his own. You may remember a few weeks ago, we were laughing about that because God said, hey, listen, you're going to die. You're super old. You're going to die. I want you to walk up that mountain. Imagine that. You think about your grandparent. Would you want your grandparent to go climb a mountain? You'd be like, no, you're not climbing the mountain. We're not even going to carry you up there. You're too old. Just stay down here. Sit down, relax, right? Moses was not that way. He could get up, and he got himself up that mountain in the strength of the Lord, obviously. It goes on to say in verse 8, the children of Israel wept for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days. So the days of weeping and mourning for Moses ended. They officially mourned for him for 30 days. And that's actually still, there are many of the Jews, a big part of the Jewish community still does that. They still observe that. They might wear all black for 30 days, to remember the loved one, which is a good thing. We don't necessarily do that here. When we go to a funeral, you might wear black. But we're in Southern California, so sometimes people just show up in pink shorts and flip-flops and, a Hawaiian print shirt or whatever, they show up in all kinds of crazy stuff. But you might wear black, but you don't do that for 30 days. But certainly you would remember your loved one. I think about people that have left a legacy, that have passed away, that I knew that were loved ones, that passed away and left a legacy. I think about my mom, first of all. And when I think about going to heaven, she's one of the reasons. Obviously, I want to go see the Lord first. But I'm excited to see my mom also. She went home many years ago, but left a legacy of faithfulness to the Lord, in spite of some real difficulties with my dad. She kept her eyes on the Lord, of Bible reading, a legacy of Bible reading and praying and trusting the Lord and being involved in ministry at church. What a wonderful legacy. It was something that I and others can build upon. To this day, if I bring up my mom or I post a picture of my mom, there's still people of old friends that knew her that will comment and just talk about what a blessing that she was to them, because that was the type of woman that she was. Left a legacy. I think about my grandfather on my dad's side, who I am told had been just an absolutely rough individual when he was younger. Came over from Mexico when he was real young, and my dad was real small, and was a cement worker, construction guy, and just rough. Had some reasons, again, to be grouchy, to be angry. But late in life, through my dad's preaching to him, he got saved. And then I found out afterwards that he would get up every morning and read his Bible, and he would pray for the family, and he would pray for me and my family. What a sweet thing that is, and that's something that I can build upon. It's a legacy. You know, I can look back and go, man, I want to end the way she did. I want to end the way that he did. And these people here are mourning for Moses for 30 days, and for good reason. This is a great leader. This is the best leader they've ever known. The only leader they've ever known, but the best leader they've ever known. And now he's gone. And they're mourning for him. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing. Now, we move on to our second main division and just the last few verses before we finish here, which is his eulogy. Does anybody know what a eulogy is? Can anybody tell us what a eulogy is? Anybody know what a eulogy is? Anybody ever been to a funeral? Yeah? A eulogy is the speech that someone gives about the person that's died. So they'll get up and they'll share a story or share some description or some characteristic about the person that's died. That's a eulogy. They're eulogizing. Well, Moses is here eulogized for us. And if you were asleep for the first half of the study, wake up, because this is the good stuff here. This is the really good stuff. In verse 9, we're reminded that Joshua is going to take over. We're told there in verse 9, now Joshua, the son of Nun, was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands on him. How did Joshua get his wisdom? And again, we're not talking about Joshua just yet. We'll get into the book of Joshua. We'll see his leadership, phenomenal leader. Not like Moses, but a phenomenal leader still. But how did he get his wisdom? He got his wisdom through Moses laying his hands on Joshua. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that the fingers and the hands of Moses possessed the spirit of wisdom and he could just kind of zap people? Hey, you want some spirit of wisdom? Here you go. Is that what that meant? No, what it indicates for us is that God, working through Moses to give the spirit of wisdom to Joshua, that's how that worked. That Moses touched Joshua, laid his hands on Joshua, and no doubt prayed for him. And what that would do is it would indicate to Moses, to Joshua, to the people that God was endorsing Joshua. But somewhere along that process, Joshua was blessed with the spirit of wisdom also. He had wisdom, a wise leader. We'll see that again. But it says this in verse 9, so the children of Israel heeded him and did as the Lord had commanded Moses. Which I think is funny. Let me just mention something real quickly before we move on to verse 10 and verses 11 and 12. It says that the children of Israel heeded him and did as the Lord had commanded Moses. In other words, they obeyed Joshua the way that they had obeyed Moses. Which I think is funny because the children of Israel were disobedient. And I think if I was Joshua, I probably would have been going, ooh, you guys are going to obey me the way you did Moses? Maybe you guys could try to get better at it. Because the people were disobedient toward Moses, oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes. And were causing problems and causing trouble. But the point is that the people recognize Joshua as being the new leader, and they go, okay, he's the new leader. But this passage is about Moses, so let's read about Moses, verse 10. Here's the eulogy. We're going to learn two things here in verse 10. But since then, there has not arisen in Israel a prophet like Moses. What does that tell us? The first thing it tells us there is that Moses was unique. As Moses is being eulogized, we learn that Moses is unique. We're told there's never been a prophet like him since in the land of Israel. Joshua would take over and would be a phenomenal leader. There would be many other leaders after that, but there were none that could compare to Moses. And there was not ever a prophet like him that had arisen in Israel. He was unmatched. He was unique. That's a wonderful thing, right? I mean, all of us, in a sense, are unique. We all have different abilities and characteristics, and the way we look, or the way we act, or the way we talk, and just different things that we do. We're all unique in our own way. But obviously, what's being told to us here is that Moses was set apart from everybody, and that he was a prophet, and he was unmatched, and nobody could really match what God had done through him. He was a special man that had been made special by God to be used for a special test, special calling. But we also learn that he was unique in verse 10 when it says, whom the Lord knew face to face. He was unique in that. It was God who had said previously in the book of Deuteronomy, he announced, he said, Moses and I are friends. God said this. He says, we talk face to face like friends do. Now, God could speak to other people, and in fact, he did. But he doesn't seem to have ever had a relationship like that again. Obviously, you could say with Jesus. But with Moses, he spoke to him face to face, we're told. And Moses oftentimes would retreat to the tent or, go into the tabernacle and there would meet with God face to face. And we don't really understand all that means. Like, what does that mean? Did God have a face and Moses was looking at it? What does that mean? Good question. I don't know. But what we're told here, the testimony is that God knew Moses. And did you notice that? Whom the Lord knew face to face. The emphasis is on the Lord, who the Lord knew. Moses knew God, yes. But more importantly, the Lord knew Moses. And he knew him face to face. He was unique in that way. All of us have the ability to talk to God at any time. You can talk to him right now. You can talk to him when you're in the kitchen later. You can talk to him when you're in the restroom later. You can certainly talk to him in math class when you're about to take a test. Oh, God, have mercy on my soul. I'm about to flunk this test, Lord, unless you have mercy on me. We can talk to God anywhere that we are at, right? We understand that. We have access. But there was something different about the relationship that God and Moses had. And they talked to each other face to face. But there's something else that we see here in verse 10. Not only was he unique, but I just mentioned the other thing. It was unique that he had this relationship face to face, but also that he was friends with God. I was in Newport Beach one time with my son. And we're driving down the street. We're leaving the beach. My son and my daughter, but at that point I was just with my son. And we're passing by this restaurant, and I looked, I'm like, hey! And my mind went blank. I'm trying to tell my son, hey, there's a basketball player. And he's like, what basketball player? And I'm like, Chicago Bulls, blonde hair, a dress. He used to dress like a woman. He's looking at me like, what in the world are you talking about? And I went and made my U-turn. I'm like, dude, it's Dennis Rodman. And we jumped out, and we went. He was sitting at a table, enjoy. He was drinking or something. We didn't care. We came up like just full on, just fans. I didn't even like the guy. I don't even watch basketball. I didn't even like the Chicago Bulls. I remember Jordan, but that's all I remember. I remember Dennis Rodman because the guy was a freak. But I got out and I'm like, Dennis, what's up, dude? And, he took a picture with us. So what? Lots of people take pictures with Dennis Rodman. So what? We've been to professional soccer games. Taking pictures with different soccer players. David Beckham. Ooh. Good-looking guy. I'm not fruity, but good-looking guy. Everybody knows that. So what? What does that matter? Who cares? They're just people. Yeah, they may be special people, special abilities. Sure. So, to be a friend of God, now we're talking. For somebody to be at my funeral and go, yeah, Pastor Chris, I don't know, he's a little weird or, whatever, he's dressed funny or whatever. But man, that guy, he was friends with God. That's all. That's all. That's all I need. That's all I want to strive for. just friends with God. Moses was known as being friends with God. It tells us there whom the Lord knew face to face. And we know, again, from past studies that God had said, hey, Moses and I, man, we talk like friends face to face. Sit down and just chop it up. What a wonderful thing to say about someone. Think about your parents, If your parents, God forbid, if your parents passed away right now and you had a funeral next week, what would you say about your parents? What would you say? Would you say, my dad, you know what? He wasn't perfect, man, but he did his best to try and love the Lord. That's a good thing. Or mom, yeah, she didn't always make my PB&Js right, but you know what? She really loved Jesus, man. She always took me to church, man. She's always praying for me. I mean, that's what we want. We want to be friends with God. That's the goal. That's the goal. Not riches, not fame. Just friends with God. That should be what we're striving for. Now, there's one more thing here. Not only was he unique and not only was he friends with God, but it may be, sounds simple to say, but he was faithful. Verses 11 and 12. In all the signs and wonders which the Lord sent him to do. Catch that. The Lord sent him to do in the land of Egypt, before Pharaoh, before all his servants, and in all his land, and by all that mighty power and all the great terror which Moses performed in the sight of all Israel. Did you catch it? Verse 11. The Lord sent him to do. Verse 12, which Moses performed. Moses found out what his calling was, and then he set his heart to doing that. He was faithful to the end. Now, I love what's missing here. Verse 11 says, in all the signs and wonders which the Lord sent him to do in the land of Egypt, before Pharaoh, before all his servants, and in all his land, and by all that mighty power and all the great terror which Moses performed in the sight of all Israel. You know what's missing? What's missing was Moses' mistakes. Like when Moses was supposed to speak to the rock, and he said, yeah, God, I got this. And he went over and beat the rock. Moses had made mistakes in his life. It doesn't say here, well, you know what, he was a really good guy. I mean, he was a murderer, but he's a really good guy. Those things are erased. The fact is that all of us are going to have dark spots in our lives where we've made foolish choices, foolish decisions. Sometimes those decisions can mark us for the rest of our lives. But what we want is for the tenor of our lives, for for our lives in general as a whole to be a life that is pursuing the Lord, so that people at the end don't go, well, you know what? Yeah, he was a pretty good dad. But then again, he was kind of a bum because he left us. But he was okay, dad. We want them to say, yeah, he had mistakes. He made mistakes. But you know what? At the end of his life, man, he was following the Lord, or she was following the Lord. Yeah, these things happen, but she was following the Lord. Those are the things that we want to be, the overarching memories of our lives. That, you know what? This person was a friend of God. Yeah, sometimes they cause their mom a headache, but they love the Lord. The things that Moses did wrong are not mentioned here. And that is because, generally speaking, the whole of his life was spent in faithfulness to God. After he murdered a man. But it was spent in faithfulness to God. That's what we want. All of you have made mistakes. I've made mistakes. All of us have struggled with sin. That will continue as long as we're here on this earth in these bodies. We're going to make some bad decisions sometimes. But the goal is to spend the whole of our lives pursuing the Lord. And allow the Lord to work in such a way that those things are forgotten about, that they're erased. And at the end of my life, when I lay my head down for the last time and I'm buried and put underground, that people remember not the mistakes I made, but faithfulness to the Lord. Now, how do I accomplish this? How do I stay faithful to the end? How do I do that? Well, the secret is found in verses 11 and 12. It says there, in all the signs and wonders which the Lord had sent him to do. Number one, find out what it is that God wants you to do. Now, I know that's rough. I know that's hard. I'm not trying to tease you or make you guys feel bad. The reason I say that is because I know that many of you, you've come to me and talked to me and been like, man, like, what is the Lord calling me to do? And the fact is, I could say, look, I can point to things in the Bible and I go, well, you know what? This is the will of God. It says right here, you do these things. But I know what you want to know. You want to know, like, what is your specific calling? I don't know that. And God will reveal that to you when he's ready and when you're ready. Now, the problem is we go, well, I'm ready right now. No, you're not. You might think you are, but you're not. When God's ready, when he sees that you're ready, then he'll reveal that to you. Moses found out what his calling was when he was 40 years old. What do I do in the meantime? Just stay faithful to the Lord and what you know you should be doing. Loving your enemies, praising him, just those things. Just stay faithful to that. God will reveal your calling. But once you know what your calling is, just do that and don't do anything else. Just do that and don't do anything else. Because what happens is this in verse 11, which the Lord sent him to do, verse 12, and by all that mighty power and all that great terror. Whose mighty power and whose great terror? Moses's? Moses didn't have mighty power and great terror. That was God's mighty power and great terror. And when Moses committed himself to being obedient to the Lord, then God was free to funnel his great or his mighty power and his great terror through Moses. Moses was simply a funnel. Like when you're putting oil in your car and you have a funnel and you pour that oil in. All that funnel's doing is allowing you to transfer what's in the bottle to the inside of your engine case. That's all it's doing. Then when you're done with that funnel, you get it and you clean it, toss it off or whatever, you're done with it. That's all Moses was. Once he committed himself to doing what God called him to do, then God had the freedom then to flow through him. That's the secret. That's the secret to being faithful, to finishing well. Is just wait for the Lord to reveal what he wants you to do. And then once you find that out, don't do anything else. Commit yourself to that and nothing else. And don't allow yourself to be deterred from anything, to the right or to the left. And you'll make mistakes. Join the club. Join the club. We all make mistakes. I've made some horrendous mistakes. I'll make more, don't worry. That's what we do. But what we do is we commit ourselves to the Lord and we go, Lord, I'm sorry, please forgive me for what I did. Now, please work in me, continue using me. That's what Moses did. He allowed the Lord to work through him. Father, thank you so much for your word and